I want to tell you something that's a little embarrassing to admit. For nearly 15 years, I grew tomatoes in the same raised bed. Same spot, same soil, same varieties, year after year after year. And every single season, I'd dump in more fertilizer, more compost, more amendments, wondering why my harvests kept getting a little worse. I blamed the weather. I blamed the seed companies. I even blamed the neighborhood squirrels, and Lord knows they deserve some blame. But not for this. The truth is, I was doing something fundamentally wrong, and I didn't even know it. Then about 6 years ago, I took a trip out to Holmes County, Ohio. If you've never been, it's rolling green hills, white farmhouses, laundry on the line, and some of the most productive small farms you'll ever lay eyes on. I was visiting an Amish family, the Yoders, and I remember standing at the edge of their kitchen garden looking out at maybe a quarter-acre of vegetables. What stopped me cold was how organized it looked, but not in the way you'd think. It wasn't rows of the same thing stretching out in perfect lines. It was patches, clusters. One section had beans climbing up corn stalks. The next section over was thick with squash and pumpkins, and another section, where I could have sworn I saw tomatoes the year before, was nothing but clover and rye grass waving in the breeze. I said to the father, "Samuel," I said, "what happened to your tomatoes?" And he just smiled and said, "They're resting." That one word, resting, rewired my entire understanding of how a garden works. And today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how the Amish rotate their crops, why they do it, and how you can set up the same system in your own backyard, whether you've got a quarter-acre or 4 raised beds on a patio. And stick around to the end, because I'll share a dead simple clover trick that can add back more nitrogen to your soil than a $50 bag of fertilizer, and it costs you about $3. Now, I'll be honest with you. When Samuel first started explaining his rotation plan, I was skeptical. I'd read the gardening books. I'd watched the videos. I knew crop rotation was a thing, sure, but I thought it was something big commercial farms worried about, not backyard growers like me. I figured if I just kept feeding the soil, it wouldn't matter where I planted what. But what I realized spending time around that Holmes County community is that I'd been thinking about soil completely backward. I was treating it like a bank account. Just keep making deposits of fertilizer and you can withdraw forever. The Amish treat it more like a living creature. You don't just feed it. You let it heal. You let it rest. You rotate what you ask of it. And that shift changed everything for me. It didn't require buying a single product. The Amish have a concept that threads through everything they do. They call it Gelassenheit, and it roughly translates to yielding or letting be. It's this deep principle of not forcing things, of working with the natural order instead of fighting against it. And when it comes to the garden, Gelassenheit means you don't bully the soil into producing. You work in rhythm with what the soil can give and what it needs back. Now think about the practical reality here. These are families with 8, 10, 12 people sitting down at the dinner table. They're not gardening as a hobby. They're feeding everyone from what that land produces. Failure is not an option. So every method they use has been tested by generations, refined by necessity, and passed down because it flat out works. And here's where the science backs them up completely. Modern soil science has confirmed that planting the same crop family in the same spot year after year depletes specific nutrients, builds up soil-borne pathogens, and creates pest cycles that get worse every season. Researchers at Penn State, Ohio State, and Cornell have all published studies showing that even a simple 3-year rotation can increase yields by 40 to 70% compared to continuous monoculture. The Amish figured this out without a single lab. They just paid attention. All right, let me walk you through the actual system step by step, the way it was explained to me, and the way I've been using it now for the past 6 years. Step 1 is understanding your plant families. This is the foundation of everything. The Amish don't think of individual plants, they think in families. And you need to, too. Your heavy feeders are your nightshades. That's tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, and potatoes. These are the plants that pull the most nitrogen and phosphorus out of the ground. Then you've got your legumes, beans, peas, lentils. These are your givers. They've got nodules on their roots that partner with bacteria called rhizobia to pull nitrogen right out of the air and fix it into the soil. Then there's your brassicas. Cabbage, broccoli, kale, cauliflower, Brussels, sprouts. Heavy feeders, but they pull different nutrients and are susceptible to different diseases than nightshades. And finally, your root crops and alliums. Carrots, beets, onions, garlic, turnips. These are lighter feeders, and they break up the soil with their roots. The first thing I did when I started this system was take a piece of paper and write down everything I grow, then sort it into those 4 groups. I'd encourage you to do the same thing. Just grab a napkin and a pen right now if you want. It takes 2 minutes and it'll make everything else click. Step 2 is dividing your growing space into 4 zones. Now, if you've got in-ground beds, this is straightforward. Just divide your garden area into 4 roughly equal sections. If you're working with raised beds, each bed becomes a zone. The Yoder family had their quarter-acre kitchen garden split into 4 plots with simple grass paths between them. Nothing fancy. You don't need to build anything. You just need to know which section is which. I label mine with little wooden stakes. Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3, Zone 4. In Zone 1, Year 1, you plant your heavy feeders, the nightshades. Zone 2 gets your legumes. Zone 3 is for your brassicas. Zone 4 is root crops and alliums. Then every single year, everything shifts 1 zone clockwise. So Year 2, your nightshades move to where the legumes were, and they're moving into soil that the beans just pumped full of nitrogen. The legumes move to where the brassicas were. The brassicas move to where the root crops were, and the root crops move to where the nightshades were. You just keep rotating every year, 1 shift. If you're in zones 3 or 4 where your growing season is short, say you're up in Minnesota or Vermont, you can simplify to a 3-zone rotation and combine your root crops in with whichever group has the most space. Down in zones 8 and 9, where folks are growing nearly year-round, you can actually run 2 rotations per year, 1 for your spring and summer crops, and 1 for your fall and winter crops. That's something I picked up from an Amish settlement down near Pinecraft, Florida, believe it or not. Step 3 is what Samuel called feeding the next family. This is the part that really blew my mind. After you harvest a section and before the next family goes in, you amend the soil specifically for what's coming, not what just left. So when your nightshades are done in Zone 1 and you know legumes are coming in next year, you don't need to add nitrogen. The legumes will make their own. Instead, you add phosphorus and potassium, a little bone meal, some wood ash. When legumes finish and brassicas are coming, you hit it with good compost and a nitrogen source because brassicas are hungry. When brassicas are done and root crops are next, you go easy. Just a light top dressing of aged compost. You don't want too much nitrogen for root crops, or you'll get beautiful leafy tops and skinny little carrots. I learned that the hard way, trust me. And when root crops are done and your heavy-feeding nightshades are coming back around, that's when you lay on the good stuff. Rich compost, aged manure, fish emulsion, whatever your go-to fertility source is. This targeted amending means you're never wasting inputs. You're putting exactly what the next crop needs, right where it needs it. University of Wisconsin research showed that targeted soil amendment based on rotation sequence reduced fertilizer costs by about 35% while maintaining or improving yields. The Amish don't need that study. They've been doing it this way because manure and compost aren't free, and you don't waste what isn't free. Step 4 is cover cropping your resting zone. Now, this is where the Amish really separate themselves from most backyard gardeners. Remember that patch of clover and rye I saw at the Yoder place? That was their resting zone. Every year, one of their 4 zones gets planted not with a cash crop, but with a cover crop. Sometimes it's crimson clover, sometimes it's winter rye, sometimes it's a mix of both with some daikon radish thrown in. The cover crop does 4 things at once. It prevents erosion, suppresses weeds, adds organic matter when you chop it down, and in the case of clover, fixes nitrogen. Now I know what you're thinking. Gary, I don't have enough space to let a quarter of my garden just sit there growing clover. I hear you. Here's how I handle it in my garden, which isn't huge. I do a modified version where I plant my cover crop in late fall after I pull my last crops, and I let it grow through winter and into early spring. Then I chop it down about 3 to 4 weeks before planting. In zones 5 through 7, that means I'm sowing cover crop seed in September or October and chopping it in April. In zones 3 and 4, you might get your cover crop in by August and chop it as soon as the ground thaws in spring. In zones 8 and 9, you've got so much growing season that you can actually do a quick 60-day cover crop between your summer and fall rotations. The point is, even if you can't dedicate a full zone to rest, you can work cover crops into the gaps. Every little bit counts. Step 5 is companion planting within each zone. The Amish don't just rotate between zones, they also think carefully about what goes together within a zone. Samuel's nightshade zone wasn't just tomatoes in rows. He had basil planted between the tomato plants because it repels aphids and whiteflies. He had marigolds, specifically French marigolds, Tagetes patula, ringing the outside of the bed because their roots release a compound called alpha-terthionyl that kills root knot nematodes in the soil. He had a row of carrots along the edge of his brassica zone because the carrot fly and the cabbage butterfly repel each other. This isn't just folklore. Oregon State University confirmed that French marigold root exudates significantly reduced nematode populations in adjacent soil. So, within each of your 4 zones, think about beneficial pairings. Tomatoes with basil and marigolds, beans with corn and squash. That's the classic 3 sisters planting the Amish adopted from indigenous traditions, and they'll be the first to tell you where they learned it. Carrots with onions. Lettuce tucked in the shade of your taller brassicas. I started doing intentional companion planting about 3 years ago, and the difference in pest pressure alone has been remarkable. I used to lose maybe 20% of my brassicas to cabbage worms. Last year, with nasturtiums and dill planted as trap crops around the edges, I lost maybe 5%. Step 6 is keeping records. I cannot stress this enough. The Amish families I've visited all keep some kind of garden journal. Samuel's wife, Rebecca, had a little notebook in the kitchen with a hand-drawn map of the garden updated every year, which zone grew what, when it went in, when it came out, what the yield was like, what problems they saw. She'd been keeping it for over 20 years. That notebook is more valuable than any soil test because it shows patterns over time. I started my own version. Nothing fancy, just a composition notebook. I sketch my zones, write down what went where, note when I amended the soil and with what, And at the end of the season, I jot down how things went. After 6 years of doing this, I can see exactly how the rotation has improved things. My tomato yields are up significantly, my pest problems are down, and I haven't bought synthetic fertilizer in 4 years. If you're finding value in learning how the Amish approach crop rotation, hit subscribe. I've got a lot more of these coming, including one on how they manage water without a single irrigation system that I think is going to surprise you. Now, let me share some patterns I've noticed in conventional gardening and how this Amish rotation approach handles things differently. I did most of these myself for years, so no judgment here. The first pattern is what I call the loyalty trap. A lot of us find the perfect spot for our tomatoes, good sun, close to the hose, and we plant them there every year forever. The Amish approach says nothing stays put. Everything moves, and the reason is something called soil fatigue. When you grow nightshades in the same spot repeatedly, you build up pathogens like verticillium and fusarium, wilt in the soil. These fungi can persist for years. By rotating, you're starving those pathogens out because the crop they depend on isn't there anymore. 3 years of rotation typically crashes pathogen populations dramatically. The second pattern is fertilizer dependency. I used to think the answer to declining yields was more inputs, more fertilizer, more amendments, more products. The Amish approach is the opposite. Grow the fertility. Use legumes to fix nitrogen. Use cover crops to build organic matter. Let the biology in the soil do the work. I've talked to Amish farmers in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, who haven't purchased any off-farm fertility inputs in decades, and their soil is darker, richer, and more alive with earthworms than anything I've seen in a garden center demonstration plot. The third pattern is pest control by chemical. When pests show up, most of us reach for a spray, even if it's an organic one. The Amish rotation system disrupts pest life cycles naturally. Colorado potato beetles, for example, overwinter in the soil right where your potatoes were. If you move your potatoes to the other side of the garden, those beetles emerge in spring to a patch of clover instead of a buffet. Corn earworms, squash vine borers, flea beetles. Rotation disrupts all of them. It doesn't eliminate pest pressure entirely, but combined with companion planting, it reduces it to a manageable level without spraying anything. The fourth pattern is treating soil like dirt. And I mean that literally. Most conventional gardening advice treats soil as a medium, something to hold plants upright while you feed them from a bottle. The Amish treat soil as the whole system. When Samuel talks about his garden, he talks about the soil first and the plants second. He'll tell you his soil is healthy before he tells you his tomatoes are healthy, because he knows the first thing causes the second. Modern soil biology research confirms this. The soil microbiome, the bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, all of it, is the immune system and the digestive system of your garden. Rotation, cover cropping, and organic amendments keep that microbiome diverse and active. Monoculture kills it off. All right, now here's something I picked up from an Amish family in an Indiana settlement near Shipshewana that I haven't seen mentioned in any gardening guide I've ever read. It's almost stupidly simple, and I actually laughed when they told me because I thought they were pulling my leg. After you chop down your cover crop in spring, say you've got a nice stand of crimson clover, don't till it in. Instead, lay it right there on the surface like a mulch mat. Then take a garden fork, not a tiller, just a regular garden fork, and poke holes straight down through the clover residue every 6 to 8 inches across the whole bed. Don't turn the soil, just stab and wiggle, Then plant your transplants or seeds right into those holes. What you're doing is keeping the soil structure completely intact, leaving the fungal networks undisturbed, and letting the clover residue break down slowly on the surface, feeding the soil from the top, down the way a forest floor works. The first year I tried this, I was sure it would be a disaster. It looked messy. It felt wrong. But my tomatoes that year were the best I'd grown in a decade. The soil stayed moist longer because of the mulch layer. Weed pressure was almost nothing. And by midsummer, that clover residue had broken down into the most beautiful dark, crumbly top layer you've ever seen. A researcher at the Rodale Institute told me this method is essentially no-till transplanting with a living mulch residue, and it preserves mycorrhizal fungal networks that tillage destroys. The Amish family just called it not making extra work for yourself. I love that. Here's what it all comes down to. The Amish don't have a secret formula or a magic product. What they have is a system built on observation, patience, and respect for how soil actually works. Crop rotation isn't complicated. It's 4 groups, 4 zones, 1 shift per year. Feed for what's coming, not what's leaving. Rest the soil when you can. Pay attention and write it down. That's it. That's the whole thing. And if you do it, I truly believe you'll see the same kind of results I've seen. More food, fewer problems, and a garden that actually gets better every year instead of slowly wearing out. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Are you already doing some kind of rotation? Did you fall into the loyalty trap like I did? Or maybe you've got your own trick you picked up from a grandparent or a neighbor. Drop it down there, because I learn as much from you all as you do from me. Hit subscribe if you want more of these deep dives into how traditional cultures approach the garden. Thanks for spending time with me today. I'll see you in the next one.